My name is Emma Carter, and I'm 13 years old. This is the story of what happened when my Uncle Joe won $70,000 in the lottery. You might think winning that much money would make someone happy. You'd be wrong. It all started on a rainy Saturday morning in October. I was at my house watching TV when the phone rang. My mom answered it, and I heard her gasp. "Joe, are you serious? Oh my God." I looked over at my mom. She had her hand over her mouth, and tears were running down her face. I thought something terrible had happened. "Mom, what's wrong?" I asked, feeling scared. She hung up the phone and turned to me with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. "Your Uncle Joe just won $70,000 in the lottery." "What, really?" I jumped off the couch, excited. Uncle Joe was my mom's younger brother. He was 35 years old and worked as a janitor at the local elementary school. He'd never had much money, always struggling to pay his bills. He lived in a tiny apartment and drove a car that broke down every other week. "We need to go see him right now," Mom said, grabbing her keys. When we got to Uncle Joe's apartment, there were already people there. My grandma, my Aunt Linda, and several of Uncle Joe's friends were crowded into his small living room. Uncle Joe was sitting on his old couch, holding the lottery ticket like it was made of gold. His hands were shaking, and he looked like he might cry or laugh or both. "I can't believe it," he kept saying. "I actually won $70,000. Everyone was hugging him and congratulating him. My grandma was crying happy tears. Aunt Linda was already planning how Uncle Joe should spend the money. "Joe, you should buy a new car," she said. "That old thing of yours is a death trap." "Or move to a better apartment," my mom suggested. "You deserve to live somewhere nice." Uncle Joe just smiled and nodded, but he looked overwhelmed, like the reality of winning hadn't really hit him yet. I went up to him and gave him a hug. "Congratulations, Uncle Joe." He hugged me back tight. "Thanks, Emma. This is crazy, isn't it?" "It's amazing," I said. "What are you going to do with all that money?" Uncle Joe got a strange look on his face. "I have some ideas," he said quietly, "but I need to think about it first." After that day, something weird happened. Uncle Joe disappeared. Not literally disappeared. We knew where he was, but he stopped answering his phone. He stopped coming to family dinners. When we went to his apartment, he either didn't answer the door or made excuses about being busy. "This isn't like Joe," my mom said, worried. "Something's wrong." "Maybe he's just overwhelmed," my dad suggested. "Winning that much money is probably stressful." But weeks went by, and Uncle Joe stayed distant. He quit his job at the school, which made sense. He didn't need to work anymore. But he didn't tell anyone what he was doing with his time or his money. My grandma was especially worried. "He won't even talk to his own mother," she said sadly. "What could be so important that he's ignoring his family?" Then one day, about a month after the lottery win, my mom got a strange phone call. "Hello, yes, this is she. What, when? Okay, I'll be right there." She hung up, looking shocked and confused. "What happened?" I asked. "That was the bank," Mom said. "They said Uncle Joe has been making some unusual transactions, and they wanted to verify everything was okay." "What kind of transactions?" "They wouldn't say, just that the amounts were large and frequent." My mom went to the bank to find out what was going on. I begged her to let me come along. "Emma, this is adult business," Mom started. "Please, Uncle Joe is my uncle too. I want to help." Mom finally agreed, and we drove to the bank together. The manager, Mr. Thompson, met us in his office. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Carter," he said. "We're concerned about your brother's account activity." "What's he doing?" Mom asked. Mr. Thompson pulled out some papers. "In the past month, Mr. Joseph Carter has withdrawn $65,000 from his account. That's almost all of his lottery winnings, minus taxes." $65,000, Mom said, shocked. "On what?" "That's what concerns us. The withdrawals are all in cash, in amounts just under $5,000 to avoid reporting requirements. When we see patterns like this, it often indicates something illegal, money laundering, drug purchases, or other criminal activity. Joe would never do drugs, Mom said, angry. He's a good person. I'm not accusing him of anything, Mr. Thompson said gently. But these patterns are concerning. We wanted to alert you in case something is wrong. Mom thanked Mr. Thompson, and we left the bank. She was quiet the whole drive home, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Where could Uncle Joe be spending $65,000? I wondered aloud. I don't know, Mom said, but I'm going to find out. Mom decided enough was enough. She drove to Uncle Joe's apartment that evening and pounded on the door until he answered. I was with her. I wanted to see what was going on, too. Uncle Joe opened the door looking tired and thin. He'd lost weight, and he had dark circles under his eyes. Sarah, what are you doing here? He asked my mom. What am I doing here? Joe, you've been ignoring your family for a month. The bank called me because they're worried about your account activity. What is going on? Uncle Joe sighed and stepped aside. You might as well come in. We walked into his apartment and I gasped. It looked exactly the same as before. The same old furniture, the same small TV, the same worn carpet. Nothing had changed. Joe, Mom said slowly, where's all your money going? Uncle Joe sat down heavily on his couch. He looked at us for a long moment, like he was deciding whether to tell the truth. Finally, he spoke. I've been helping people. Helping people, Mom repeated. What people? People who need it more than me. Uncle Joe stood up and walked to his desk. He pulled out a folder and handed it to my mom. Inside were receipts and bank statements. Mom looked through them, her eyes getting wider with each page. Joe, these are medical bills, rent payments, utility bills. Yes, Uncle Joe said. I've been finding families who are struggling and helping them pay their bills. How did you even find these people? Mom asked. Through the school, Uncle Joe explained. When I was working there as a janitor, I got to know a lot of the teachers and families. I knew which kids came to school hungry, which families were about to be evicted, which parents were choosing between medicine and food. He pointed to one receipt. That's for the Rodriguez family. Their daughter Maria is in 3rd grade. Her dad lost his job and they were 2 months behind on rent. I paid it. He pointed to another. That's for Mrs. Johnson's cancer treatment. She's the art teacher. Her insurance wouldn't cover everything, and she was going into debt. I paid $15,000 to cover what she needed. Mom was crying now, so was I. Joe, this is incredible, Mom whispered. But why didn't you tell us? Because I didn't want anyone to know, Uncle Joe said. If word got out that I was giving away money, everyone would want some. People I don't even know would show up asking for help. I wanted to help the people I knew really needed it, not just anyone who asked. For a few weeks, Uncle Joe's secret stayed safe. He continued quietly helping families, and only my mom and I knew about it. But then someone found out. It was my Aunt Linda, Mom's sister. She worked at the bank and somehow accessed Uncle Joe's account records. When she saw all the money going out, she got suspicious and started investigating. She showed up at our house one evening, looking angry. Sarah, we need to talk about Joe, she said, barging in. What about Joe? Mom asked, defensive. He's being scammed. He's given away almost all his money to strangers. We need to stop him before he loses everything. He's not being scammed, Mom said. He's helping people. Helping people? Linda laughed harshly. Sarah, he won $70,000 and has less than $5,000 left. He's throwing away his chance at a better life. He's using his money how he wants to use it, Mom said firmly. It's insane. Joe finally has a chance to get ahead and he's just giving it all away. He could buy a house. He could invest. He could actually build a future. Maybe this is his future, I said quietly. Both women turned to look at me. Maybe helping people is what makes him happy. You wouldn't understand, Emma, Aunt Linda said dismissively. You're just a child. I understand that Uncle Joe is doing something good, I said, my voice stronger now. And I think it's wrong to tell him how to use his own money. Aunt Linda called a family meeting. She gathered my grandma, my parents, and Uncle Joe at Grandma's house to discuss Joe's financial situation. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I hid in the hallway and listened. "Joe, we're worried about you," Grandma started gently. "Linda says you've given away most of your lottery money." "I have," Uncle Joe admitted, "and I don't regret it." "But Joe, honey, you need to think about your future," Grandma said. "You're 35, you don't have a retirement fund, you don't own a home, you need to keep some of that money for yourself." "I've kept enough for what I need," Uncle Joe said. "$25,000 isn't enough," Aunt Linda said, her voice sharp. "Joe, you won the lottery. This was your one chance to change your life, and you're wasting it." "I'm not wasting it," Uncle Joe said calmly. "I'm using it exactly how I want to use it." "To play hero," Linda said sarcastically. "To buy people's gratitude." "No," Uncle Joe said, and his voice was harder now. "To make a difference. To help people who have no other options. To use money for something more important than a new car or a bigger TV." "Those people aren't your responsibility," Linda argued. "Maybe not, but I have the ability to help them, so why wouldn't I?" The family meeting ended badly. Aunt Linda stormed out, saying Uncle Joe was being foolish and irresponsible. My grandma was torn, not wanting to take sides. My parents supported Uncle Joe, but wished he'd kept some more money for himself. The family was splitting over Uncle Joe's choice. Over the next few weeks, Aunt Linda started spreading rumors. She told relatives and family friends that Uncle Joe was being scammed, that he'd lost his mind, that someone needed to take control of his finances. Some people believed her. Uncle Joe's cousin Marcus showed up at his apartment demanding that Joe invest with him instead of throwing money away. Uncle Joe refused and stopped talking to Marcus. Aunt Linda even tried to get legal guardianship over Uncle Joe, claiming he was mentally incompetent. But Uncle Joe wasn't incompetent, he was just generous. The court dismissed Linda's petition immediately. The fighting was tearing our family apart. One day after school, I decided to do something I'd been thinking about for weeks. I wanted to see for myself what Uncle Joe's money was doing. I knew one of the families he'd helped, the Rodriguez family. Their daughter Maria was in my youth group at church. I'd heard her talking about how her family almost lost their apartment, but then miraculously got caught up on rent. I went to Maria's apartment building after school. It was in a rough neighborhood, the kind of place my mom always told me not to go alone, but I had to see. I knocked on the Rodriguez apartment door. Mrs. Rodriguez answered, looking surprised to see me. "Emma, what are you doing here, sweetie?" "I wanted to talk to you about something," I said. "About my Uncle Joe." Mrs. Rodriguez's face changed. She looked emotional, like she might cry. "Your uncle is an angel," she said. "Please come in." Mrs. Rodriguez made me hot chocolate and told me her story. "We were going to be evicted," she said. "My husband lost his job 3 months ago and we couldn't pay rent. We had nowhere to go. Then one day, a man showed up at our door, your uncle. He said he heard we needed help." "We didn't want to take charity," Mrs. Rodriguez continued. "We have our pride, but your uncle said it wasn't charity. He said it was one person helping another, and someday we could help someone else. He paid our back rent $500. He also paid our electric bill and bought groceries. He saved our family, Emma. We would have been on the street without him." Mrs. Rodriguez wasn't the only one with a story. Over the next week, I talked to other families Uncle Joe had helped. The art teacher, Mrs. Johnson, whose cancer treatment Uncle Joe had paid for. The Wilson family, whose son needed expensive medication for his asthma. The single mom who needed car repairs to get to work. The elderly couple who couldn't afford their heating bill. Every person had the same thing to say. Uncle Joe had saved them when they had nowhere else to turn. While I was learning about all the good Uncle Joe had done, my mom discovered something about Aunt Linda. Linda had always been jealous of Joe. When they were kids, Joe was the favorite, the funny, kind one everyone loved. Linda was smart and ambitious, but people found her cold and difficult. When Joe won the lottery, Linda had expected him to share it with her. She'd even hinted that he should give her money to invest in her business idea. Joe had said no. He said if he was going to give money away, it would go to people who truly needed it, not to family members who just wanted more. That's when Linda turned against him. "She's not worried about Joe," my mom told me after talking to Grandma. "She's angry he didn't give her any money. All this concern about his finances is really just jealousy disguised as worry." This made me furious. Aunt Linda had almost torn our family apart because of greed. 6 months after winning the lottery, Uncle Joe had almost nothing left. He'd given away $98,000 of his $100,000 prize. After taxes, he had about $5,000 remaining in his account. My mom tried to convince him to stop, to keep the last bit for emergencies. "Joe, what if your car breaks down? What if you need to go to the doctor? You need to keep some money for yourself." "I'll manage," Uncle Joe said with a smile. "I always have before." Then one day, Uncle Joe got a phone call that changed everything. It was from Mrs. Henderson, the school principal where he used to work. She was calling about a student named Tommy Chen, a 5th grader whose father had just died in a car accident. Tommy's mother had no life insurance for her husband, and she couldn't afford the funeral costs. "I know you've been helping families, Joe," Mrs. Henderson said. "I'm not supposed to know, but word has gotten around quietly. Is there any chance you could help the Chen family? They're desperate." Uncle Joe had exactly $4,800 in his account. The funeral would cost $5,000. He donated it all, every last penny, and added $200 from his own pocket. Uncle Joe was officially broke. With no money left, Uncle Joe had to face reality. He'd given away his entire lottery fortune in 6 months. Aunt Linda heard about it and called everyone in the family. "See, I told you Joe was being irresponsible. Now he has nothing. He's back where he started, working as a janitor with no savings and no future." Some family members agreed with her. Uncle Joe had made a mistake, they said. He should have been smarter with his money. But then something unexpected happened. 2 weeks after Uncle Joe spent his last dollar, he came home from his janitor job to find an envelope taped to his apartment door. Inside was $500 in cash and a note. "Thank you for everything. You helped us when we had nothing. Now we want to help you. Rodriguez family." The next day, another envelope appeared. This one had $300 and a note from Mrs. Johnson, the art teacher. Then another and another. The families Uncle Joe had helped, families who were still struggling themselves, were giving him money. Not a lot, but what they could afford. "They don't have to do this," Uncle Joe said, tears in his eyes. "I didn't help them so they'd pay me back." "They know that," my mom said. "That's why they're doing it. You helped them without expecting anything in return. Now they want to do the same for you." A month after Uncle Joe went broke, something bigger happened. The families he'd helped had been talking to each other. They'd realized Uncle Joe had given away his entire lottery fortune to help them, and now he had nothing. They organized a fundraiser. It started small, a bake sale at the elementary school, but word spread. Local news picked up the story of the lottery winner who'd given away everything to help struggling families and the families who were trying to pay him back. The story went viral. Suddenly, donations were coming in from strangers across the country. People were moved by Uncle Joe's generosity and wanted to help him the way he'd helped others. Within 2 weeks, the fundraiser had raised $45,000. Uncle Joe couldn't believe it. "This is too much," he kept saying. "I don't deserve this." "Yes, you do," Mrs. Rodriguez told him at the fundraiser celebration. "You showed us that kindness matters more than money. Now let us show you the same thing." Even Aunt Linda came to the fundraiser, though she stood in the back looking uncomfortable. After the celebration, she approached Uncle Joe. "Joe, I need to apologize," she said, not meeting his eyes. "I was wrong about you. I thought you were being stupid with your money, but you were being kind, really, truly kind, and I was just jealous." Why were you jealous? Uncle Joe asked gently. Because you won the lottery and you used it to make the world better, Linda said, tears in her eyes. And all I could think about was what I would have bought with that money. New car, bigger house, expensive vacations. Selfish things. You thought about other people first, and I couldn't understand that because I've never been that selfless. Uncle Joe hugged his sister. It's okay, Linda. I forgive you. I don't deserve forgiveness, Linda said. I tried to turn the family against you. I called you irresponsible and crazy. Everyone makes mistakes, Uncle Joe said. What matters is that you recognize them. A year after Uncle Joe won the lottery, I had to write an essay for English class about someone I admired. I chose Uncle Joe. In my essay, I wrote about how Uncle Joe had won $70,000 and given it all away. How he'd helped families pay rent, medical bills, and basic necessities. How he'd ended up broke but happier than he'd ever been. My teacher, Mrs. Parker, read the essay aloud to the class. This is an important lesson, she said. Money can buy things, but it can't buy happiness. Real happiness comes from helping others, from making a difference, from using what you have to make the world better. One of my classmates, a boy named Tyler, raised his hand. But isn't Uncle Joe poor now? How is being poor better than being rich? Uncle Joe has something better than money, I said. He has respect, he has gratitude, he has friends, and he has the knowledge that he changed people's lives. That's worth more than any lottery ticket. Uncle Joe's story didn't end with the fundraiser. It started a movement. People inspired by his generosity started their own giving campaigns. Pay It Forward groups formed around the city, with people helping strangers with rent, groceries, and bills. The local news did a follow-up story 6 months later, showing all the good that had come from Uncle Joe's choice to give away his lottery money. One family he'd helped had started a free meal program for hungry kids. Another had begun volunteering at homeless shelters. Mrs. Johnson, the art teacher, started a program providing free art supplies to students who couldn't afford them. Uncle Joe's generosity had created a wave of kindness throughout the community. I never expected any of this, Uncle Joe told a reporter. I just wanted to help some families who needed it. I had no idea it would inspire other people to help too. What would you say to someone who wins the lottery? The reporter asked. Uncle Joe thought for a moment. I'd say money is a tool. You can use it to build a better life for yourself, or you can use it to build a better life for others. Both choices are valid. But I've learned that the second choice brings a different kind of wealth, the kind that lasts even after the money is gone. Today, 3 years after winning the lottery, Uncle Joe still works as a janitor at the elementary school. He still lives in a small apartment. He still drives an old car that breaks down sometimes. But he's the happiest person I know. He has $47,000 saved from the fundraiser and donations. Money he's slowly and carefully giving away to families who need it, just like he did with his lottery winnings. I learned my purpose, he told me recently. It's not to be rich, it's to help people, and I can do that whether I have $70,000 or $100. My family is closer than ever. Aunt Linda learned from her mistakes and volunteers with Uncle Joe now, helping identify families who need assistance. Grandma is proud of her son. My parents support him completely. And me, I learned the most important lesson of all from Uncle Joe. True wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you touch, the kindness you show, and the difference you make. Uncle Joe won $70,000 in the lottery and gave it all away. Most people would say he lost everything. But I think he won something much more valuable. He won the respect, love, and gratitude of an entire community. He won friendships that will last forever. He won purpose and meaning. He won at life. And that's the real jackpot.